So today I'm going to talk with you about biting, and in the show notes I've got a download of a template that I'd like for you to make a copy of. It looks something like this. So just click that link. It's a bit.ly link, and you'll get this free template that you can use over and over again whenever you're trying to work on a new behavior with your bird. Just a free gift for you today. So, I don't know if you've ever been bit by a bird, but about 5 or 6 years ago, my Congo African gray, SMOKEY, bit me so bad that, it took me like 3 months of medical treatment to get over it. So, here's the story. SMOKEY, he got into the habit of kind of climbing off his cage and into my bedroom, and he started hiding underneath my dresser and pulling out carpet fibers and stuff. And then even when I moved to a new home where his cage was at a lower level than my bedroom, he got into the habit of climbing off the cage, climbing up the stairs, going into my bedroom. In this house, he went into the walk-in closet. And one time as I was getting ready to go to work, I didn't realize that he was in the closet, and all of a sudden he bit my leg so hard and just wouldn't let go. It was such a deep tissue bite that, like I said, it took about 3 months to get over. Like lots of antibiotics, and I had to go in and get it debrided and all that jazz. So it was when I learned the hard way of how to prevent a bird bite. So I get how frustrating and scary it is. Well, today I'm going to give you a total action plan of how to deal with a biting bird, and you'll walk away with some really helpful tips, not only to deal with biting, but any kind of behavior problem that you want to turn around. But we're going to specifically focus on biting. So let me introduce myself. I'm Diane Burrows. I'm the founder and CEO of birdsupplies.com, which is a company that makes wellness products for birds that feather pluck, as well as birds that have nutritional deficits and that sort of thing. And then I'm a licensed psychotherapist, so I have a whole training line of stuff that I help people like you learn how to train their bird. And I'm certified in avian nutrition and behavior and wellness, and so with that background, it really helps me to provide some helpful stuff for you. So biting is a really prevalent problem. In fact, a week doesn't go by that I'm not on one of my Facebook groups looking at it, and I see someone post a picture of like a pretty nasty bird bite, and then you start reading the comments, and people just have a lot of myths about it. Oh, well, that's just part of owning a bird, man up, deal with it, type of stuff. Or other people will say, well, that's just a phase they're going through, ignore it and it'll go away. Well, I'm going to have to respectfully disagree. It is not just a part of owning a bird to assume that you're going to have to go through getting bit, really bad bites, or having to get a surgery on your face or something. It's not a part of owning a bird at all. But we can figure out why a bird is biting and how to change that behavior and turn it around. So let's talk about 6 reasons why birds bite in the first place. One is a bird could be ill, and so a bird that just doesn't feel well is more prone to bite and get you to kind of back off and leave it alone. And so if you notice any signs of avian illness, it's time to take your bird to the vet. I've got some videos on that, and definitely blog posts and such about how to tell if your bird is sick or if your bird's in pain. And some of them have some free downloads that you can take advantage of. Now, another reason that birds tend to bite is because they get bored or lonely. And so a bird that gets bored is a bird that doesn't know how to forage or play with its toys, doesn't know how to groom itself properly, and that kind of stuff. So, a bored bird is more apt to be frustrated. Its natural needs aren't getting met, and then when it's frustrated, then it's more apt to bite. Fear is another reason that birds bite, like I had talked about with the illness. If a bite is a very efficient way for a bird to get you to back off or to leave it alone, and if it's afraid of you, it's more apt to bite out of fear. And so that is one of the more common reasons that we see birds bite. You know, birds will also bite if they're feeling stubborn and they're being asked to do something that they don't feel like doing. And then they're also apt to bite if they're feeling hormonal. And that's one of the reasons of biting, that you have to kind of look at the triggers and look at your actions, because there's a different set of actions that you would take for a hormonal biting bird than you would for a bird that's you know, fearful or lonely or sick. But most often the reason that birds bite is because it's a behavior that has been repeatedly reinforced over and over again, and the bird is getting something that it wants out of biting. So here's 5 steps that you can take to put an end to biting pretty quickly. First of all, if you have a baby bird, you know, that is mouthing things, you can teach it what the word gentle means pretty easily. You just have to catch it being gentle and reinforce that behavior. Teach it what the word means, gentle. And if you use a word in a kind of animated voice tone, use a clicker to mark that behavior and use the word as a cue, and then even offer your bird a treat. A bird's going to pick up on that vocabulary very quickly. Now, the next thing to think about, a step to take, is to learn the signals that your bird gives off when it has been triggered to bite. So when you can catch the trigger and catch your bird's body language, you're in a much better position to just avoid that bite altogether. Now, you're going to also want to figure out what is motivating the bird to bite. So not only do they get triggered to bite, then they bite, then something motivates them where they get something that they wanted. So for instance, if your bird's not feeling well, that's the trigger. The behavior is the bite. The motivating factor is it got you to back off and leave it alone, because sick birds want to be left alone. They don't want to pretend that they're well or anything like that. They just want to be left alone. So when you know what the motivating factor is, that gives you a little bit more tools in your toolbox, so to speak, in terms of turning that behavior around. Now, the fourth important thing that you can do that's totally within your control is, if you know how to read that bird's body language and you know what the triggers are and what motivates it to bite in the first place, don't put yourself in a position to get bit. So now, you know, after my hard luck story of how Smokey bit me, now I know what his body language is specifically when he's getting ready to bite. And I don't think I've even been bitten since then by him. It's been, I think, 5 or 6 years. It's actually been, 6 years since I got that bite. And so I don't put myself in a position to get bit. I read my bird's body language, and it's very rare that I ever get bit. Now, the fifth thing you can do to turn around biting behavior is to teach your bird replacement behaviors. And we'll talk about that a lot. But essentially what we're talking about here is when you're teaching your bird what to do and rewarding it at a kind of high rate of, you know, repetition and rewards, then your bird is going to learn that behavior pretty quickly, and it's going to do the replacement behaviors much more frequently than the original behavior that was your problem behavior. So I hope you've downloaded the template, because I'm going to talk about this. This is what's called the ABC template. So in behavioral terms, ABC is kind of how we dissect behavior to know how to turn it around. So A stands for antecedent. So on this form, you'll see what is the antecedent? What happens right before the behavior? So for Smokey, what I have learned is that he only really bites me when he's hormonal. And so nowadays, I only have to watch out for that about, you know, for a month out of the year during the spring when birds are naturally hormonal. So his antecedent is a certain kind of fluffing up of how he does his feathers. And it's very noticeable. And when I see that, I can back off. The behavior, of course, is the target behavior. And the more you can describe that in terms of intensity, frequency, duration, you know, that kind of stuff is really important, because then that's how you're going to know if you're making headway with turning the behavior around and solving it. And then the natural reinforcers, or reinforcers that is another word for consequence, the ABC. antecedent behavior consequence. But that's behavioral terminology, and most people don't get that. So really think about it. What reinforced that behavior to happen again after he did it? And so for my Smokey, when he was doing his hormonal biting, it was my reaction. First of all, I left the area that he was perceiving as his nesting site, which was my closet. And secondly, I had quite an animated reaction, because when you get bit like that, it hurts like heck. And so you scream, which is how parrots talk in the wild. You know, they're screaming across the rainforest. And so he's just like, hey, she's talking my language. So he got a couple of things out of that biting behavior. And I'm really glad that I was able to get it turned around so quickly. But one of the easiest ways that we know as behaviorists to turn problem behavior around is to avoid triggering the bird in the first place. So if hormonal behavior triggers Smokey, then I need to avoid allowing him to get, say, in a chronic hormonal state. Now, if, say my quick movements were the trigger, where he was afraid of me, then I would avoid the trigger by kind of slowing down. You know, I tend to be a type A personality, and so I can easily see something like that happen. But with biting, you know, we want to avoid that trigger as much as possible, and we want to avoid the bites as much as possible. Not only are they painful, but they're also kind of self-fulfilling for the bird. So it's one of those behaviors that it's like, it's not just that the bird got some kind of reward, it's kind of like it was an internal reward of like, whoa, I really got a reaction out of her, and I think I like that. I'm going to do it again. So you want to make sure that the behavior doesn't happen as much as possible, which is why you avoid the triggers and don't put yourself in a position to get bit. So this form here, like I said, is a way to understand behavior, for us to kind of analyze what's going on. Because all behavior is kind of sandwiched between a trigger and a motivator. And so when you know what that trigger and the motivator are, and you know the ins and outs of the behavior, how often does it happen, how intense is it, and that kind of stuff. When you fully understand the behavior, it's much easier to turn around. And when you sit down with yourself and you identify, okay, what are the behaviors that I want to see more of, and elicit those behaviors, then, like I said, behavior is much easier to turn around. So let me reiterate here. The fastest ways to turn around a challenging bird behavior is don't get the bird triggered in the first place, and don't put yourself in the position to get bit, but put your energy into teaching your bird replacement behaviors so that it has a new set of skills that it can rely on and that you can cue it to do whenever you see it starting to get triggered. So my bird Peachy is also a little bit of a hormonal biter. He's a Moluccan Cockatoo, and boy, do I not want that beak to bite me. Now, he's never bit me the way that I described Smokey as having bit me. His is more like a taunting, you know, it's like, "Wah!" You know, and I don't think he's ever broken my skin, but he's left a pretty good bruise on me in the past when I didn't know how to read his hormonal behavior. And so I look for his cues now. And right now, since I know how to, I work very hard at keeping, at not eliciting hormonal behaviors when it's not in the appropriate season for my birds, we don't have to deal with biting all that much anymore. But when he is hormonal, of course, I have to be very careful at reading his bird body language and not putting myself in a position to get bit. So what is that bird body language that a bird is either, you know, so fearful that it wants to get aggressive to make you back off, or you know, too hormonal or what have you, that a bite is coming? So one area to look at is the bird's eyes. So it looks almost as if the bird is looking at a distance, not at you, but at a distance off. And sometimes the shape of its eye will change. But most often what we notice with birds, especially birds that have lighter colored eyes like an African gray, is that their pupils do what's called pinning. And that is where they rapidly increase and decrease in size. So the pupil, the black dot in the middle, gets bigger and smaller, bigger and smaller. And that's a sign in a bird, you know, that they're starting to get aggressive. there. Another thing that they do when they're starting to get aggressive is they change the feather position, like on their wings, their head, and the way they fan out their tail. So it's very recognizable when you start studying your bird's body language. Knowing how to read bird body language is really an important skill, and I recommend it for everybody. But these are the signs that a bird is starting to get over anxious or wound up or what have you. So you'll notice these unusual body postures, or the tail fanning out on some birds, or different way they hold the feathers on their back and that sort of stuff. Now, my African gray, I see it mostly in his feathers and the pinning of his eyes. With Peachy, my Moluccan Cockatoo, I'll see that behavior in kind of an abnormal, I think it's a cockatoo thing, but he does this weird posture, where he's kind of like lunges at me real quick. And the minute I see that, it's like, uh-oh, it's hormone season. I need to back off. And so just being able to read his body language has saved me from a bite a number of times. And like I said earlier, avoid triggering unnatural hormonal states. So most of our large and medium-sized birds are only going to go into a hormonal state once or twice a year for a period of 2 to 4 weeks at most. And if you learn how to avoid triggering unnatural hormonal behaviors, you're going to save yourself a lot of grief. And 3 easy tips with that are socialize your bird to everybody in the family so that everybody is on the same page with, having the bird step up on them and socializing with the bird and that sort of thing. So when a bird is overly socialized with one person and that person's cuddling on them and petting them and all that, the bird's going to get a hormonal or a sexualized bond with that family member. So if they socialize with everybody, you're kind of eliminating a lot of that unnatural pair bond with a human. Also put the lights out early. So our parrots are from like the equator region of the world. That's where most of the rainforests are and stuff. And so their body is all geared toward, their circadian rhythms are all geared toward, excuse me, a photo period of about 10 to 12 hours of light and 10 to 12 hours of darkness. So making sure that your bird gets 10 to 12 hours of sleep every night, we're talking complete darkness and quiet. So you need to create like a bird room or a sleeping cage or something like that to ensure that your bird's getting that sleep that it needs. And that will go a long way toward warding off unnatural hormonal states. And then the third thing is to absolutely don't give your bird any access to nesting sites and what it perceives to be nesting materials, because that will actually throw the bird into a hormonal state. It's kind of like it just tells the body, hey, time, here's a nest, time to start making babies. And so anything like a box or hiding under the bed or in a dark closet, those are perceived as nesting sites. And then when there's soft materials like paper to shred or carpet fibers to rip up, that provides nesting materials. And so that will throw a bird into an unnatural hormonal state. Knowing how to control those hormonal states will go a long way toward warding off unnatural parrot aggression. Now, if you want to have long-term behavioral results, it's important to teach your bird what we call replacement behaviors. So replacement behaviors are teaching your bird what you want it to do as opposed to what you don't want it to do. It's much easier to teach a new behavior than to unteach an already formed habit in a bird. And literally what you only need a few pieces of equipment in order to start doing some pretty fast, science-based, very effective training with birds. I always recommend the Clicker Training for Birds book. This was written by Melinda Johnson, I think back in the late 90s. And it's obviously clicker training for birds. So clickers are these things. They're a little device. Here's one that's got a telescoping stick. But both of them have these buttons that you press like that. And they make a quick noise that's kind of distinctive. And then you follow it up with your bird's favorite treat. So I've got this little treat pouch here that I use, that allows me to like hook it on my pants, fill it up with my bird's favorite treats. I even attach the clicker. And whenever I'm trying to elicit a new behavior, I will have this on my pants and just be on the lookout for that new behavior, and click and treat my bird to do to reward the new behavior that I want to see. So that, and then I start giving the behavior a name or a cue, if you will. So I might say forage or chew, or something like it. Step up is another common one that you hear. And so you give the behavior a cue, and then your bird knows that, hey, she's cued me to do this new behavior. Now you can teach natural parrot behaviors and you can teach parrot tricks, but anytime you're teaching a new behavior, you're teaching your bird what you want it to do, as opposed to even giving any form of reinforcement or attention for the unwanted behavior. And people think, okay, training, I mean, that's got to take forever. I don't have time for it. They over-exaggerate how difficult and how much time it takes. But birds, I mean, they're as intelligent as a 4 or 5-year-old kid. And so you can literally train them very quickly. In as little as 5 or 10 minutes a day, you're going to see a huge payoff of teaching your bird replacement behaviors. And, you not only can you train your bird, but like you can also kind of make a mental note of yourself. Okay, I'm going to be watching and reinforcing my bird every time I catch it foraging, or every time I catch it watching bird TV for parrots on YouTube or whatever, And so, training your bird is very easy. Like I said, you just need a clicker. I'd get the clicker book because it's really helpful. It's almost like a recipe book for teaching your bird behaviors. It helps to have the training pouch and a little training stand, and then your bird's favorite treats, whether it's almonds, Cheerios, or millet, or what have you. You just have to figure out what your bird's favorite treat is. And when you know how to train new replacement behaviors, you can elicit those behaviors whenever you see your bird getting kind of worked up, like it's going to bite. Instead, cue the new behavior that you want to see more of, and turn your bird's mood around, per se, and you'll ward off a bite. So I've given you lots of tips on how to study behavior with the ABC model, and then how to turn it around once you see a behavior that needs to be turned around. I hope it was helpful, and until next week, we'll do a new video in a week or so. And if you like this video, please give me some thumbs up and make some comments below. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And plan on subscribing to birdsupplies.com. Every time you subscribe, it gives me more motivation to do more videos. And if you have some videos that you'd like me to do, put it in the comments down below, or just, hit me up through birdsupplies.com, and I'll definitely put it on my queue of videos to make. Thanks a lot, and happy bird training. Bye-bye.